The restaurant was dimly lit, soft jazz humming in the background, and yet, for Michael Turner, it felt painfully loud. The clinking of cutlery, the laughter of couples, and the ticking clock on the wall all reminded him that he was alone. He checked his watch again. 7:10 p.m. His blind date was supposed to arrive at 7. A part of him wished she'd cancel, another part hoped she'd walk through that door with a smile that could make him forget the loneliness that had clung to him for years. Michael was a decorated Army veteran, but life after service hadn't been kind. His wife, Emily, had passed away 5 years earlier in a car accident, leaving him to raise their son, Noah, alone. Since then, Michael had poured himself into work and fatherhood, ignoring his own heart. His friend and fellow veteran, Paul, had practically forced him to agree to this blind date. "You need someone who can see you, not just the soldier or the single dad," Paul had said. But now, sitting at a table for two with a single rose in the vase and a cold cup of coffee before him, Michael felt foolish. Maybe she saw his picture and decided not to come. Maybe she found out he was a widower with a kid. He sighed, ran his hand through his short cropped hair, and considered leaving. That's when he heard it, the sound of hurried footsteps and soft giggles. He turned and saw 4 small children standing by his table. The oldest, a girl with wavy brown hair and a red dress, stepped forward bravely. "Mister, our mommy's sorry she's late," she said. "She told us to tell you she'll be right here." Michael blinked in surprise. 4 kids. His date had 4 kids. Before he could respond, the little ones clambered around the table, their curious eyes inspecting everything. The youngest, a boy no older than 4, pointed to Michael's army pin on his jacket. "You a superhero?" he asked innocently. Michael chuckled. "Not exactly, buddy. Just someone who wore a uniform." They laughed together, and for the first time that evening, the tightness in Michael's chest eased. There was something disarming about these children, their warmth, their honesty. They reminded him of what family used to feel like. A few minutes later, a woman appeared at the door, slightly breathless. She was tall, graceful, and her hair framed her face like a soft halo. She looked around the restaurant until her eyes met his, and then she smiled, a smile so genuine it made his heart stutter. "I am so sorry," she said, rushing to the table. "The babysitter canceled last minute, and I couldn't leave them home alone." Michael stood up, pulling out her chair like a gentleman. "No need to apologize," he said warmly. "I've had good company while waiting." Her cheeks flushed as she looked at her children now coloring on the kids' menus. "I'm Grace," she said softly. "Michael," he replied. As they began to talk, the awkwardness faded. Grace told him about her life, how her husband had left 3 years ago, unable to handle the weight of raising 4 children. She had spent the years since working 2 jobs, balancing exhaustion with hope. Michael listened, every word resonating deeply. She wasn't just beautiful, she was strong, resilient, and full of quiet grace, true to her name. Over dinner, their laughter mingled with that of the children's. Noah, who'd been shy and quiet since his mother's passing, joined them later that evening when Michael picked him up. And soon, the kids were playing together near the table, building towers with sugar packets and napkins. For the first time in years, Michael saw light in his son's eyes. That night, as they stood by her car, Grace hesitated. "I know this wasn't exactly how a blind date should go," she said, embarrassed. Michael smiled. "Honestly, Grace, it was perfect. Life isn't perfect, but this felt real." Over the next few months, their paths continued to cross. Grace would bring her kids to the park where Michael often trained Noah in baseball. The children bonded instantly, as if they'd known each other forever. Grace admired how patient Michael was with his son, how he never lost his temper, even when Noah made mistakes. Michael, in turn, found himself drawn to the way Grace balanced motherhood and strength, always putting her children first. Still, challenges followed. Grace struggled financially, often skipping meals to feed her kids. Michael noticed, quietly dropping off groceries at her porch with a simple note, "For the heroes who keep going." She'd find them in the morning and smile through tears. But Michael had his own demons. Sleepless nights haunted him, memories of war, the loss of Emily, the guilt of moving on. One evening, Grace found him sitting on a park bench alone, staring at the sunset. "You miss her, don't you?" she asked gently. He nodded. "Every day. But lately, when I see you and the kids, I feel like maybe God's giving me a second chance." Grace took his hand, her eyes glistening. "Then maybe we both got one." The following winter, Grace's youngest fell ill. The doctors said it was pneumonia. She broke down in the hospital corridor, afraid she couldn't handle losing anyone else. Michael stayed by her side every moment, sleeping in the waiting chairs, praying with her, comforting her children. When the little boy finally opened his eyes and smiled weakly at his mother, Grace turned to Michael and whispered, "I don't know how I would have survived this without you." Months passed. Life began to settle again, in laughter, shared dinners, and moments that felt like home. One Sunday morning, while watching their kids build a snowman together, Grace looked at Michael and said, "You know, that night at the restaurant, I almost canceled. I thought no one would ever want someone like me, a woman with 4 kids and a past." Michael smiled, brushing snow from her hair. "And I thought no one would ever look past my scars, the ones you can't see." They stood in silence, watching their children chase each other through the snow. "I'm glad we were both wrong," Grace whispered. A year later, in that same restaurant where it all began, Michael got down on one knee. The waiter brought over a small velvet box, and the children crowded around, eyes wide with excitement. "Grace," he said softly, his voice trembling, "you and your children brought light back into my life when I didn't think it was possible. You showed me that love isn't about what we've lost, it's about what we're willing to build again. Will you marry me?" Tears spilled down her cheeks as she nodded. The children cheered, hugging them both, turning the quiet restaurant into a symphony of laughter and joy. And in that moment, surrounded by love and second chances, Michael knew, this was his new beginning.